Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had such a great time last week in Cobbs Creek, Virginia. Wonderful church. People are so hungry. Good to see good crowds. If you're anywhere near Mattoon, Illinois this weekend, we'll be there Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We'll have a great time. We'll be at New Mercy Worship Center, and we'll get into the coming of the Lord, the power of God, and magnifying Jesus. We'll have a great time. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, and specifically the gathering of nations for what happens just after the rapture of the church. So we know that the rapture of the church is signless. The second coming has tons of signs. But we see literally the aligning of nations. We talk about it every week for the Ezekiel 38 war. Man, it's so blatant, so precise, and so exact what we're watching of those nations come into position and literally start jockeying for position all around Israel, doing political things and doing militarily things. So it's like to see every side of the coin for those nations, we see it right in front of us. So it's amazing, we look at end time events and things, not just for an escape theology, we do it for a hustle theology. When you see the finish line, you run faster, not slower. So all this information we'll get into is to get us to accelerate. We have a lot to do in a short period of time. Time is very short. But the wonderful thing is the technology to see what's happening all over that points to the coming of the Lord. The amazing thing, in certain nations, you get absolutely zero information. I know England, right here in America, there was nothing said about all the cyber attacks that happened all over Iran. There were so many massive cyber attacks the last week, just radical explosions, radical, basically, things happening with Israel doing things to stop Iran from going forward with their nuclear weapons program. So we look at all the things that happen around Israel. It points to how close we are, and the Lord wants us to get into so much of it because He loves us. He wants you strengthened. He wants you encouraged. He wants you happy. He wants you hopeful. Doesn't want you troubled. Doesn't want you deceived. He wants you comforted. So as we approach the coming of the Lord, there is no bad news for the church. I mean, there's horrible things for the world, but man, it's exciting for the church. So let's look at what's happened around Israel that specifically points to the coming of the Lord, because you can't cover everything, but we try to hit the highlights of what's happened that really point to the Ezekiel 38 war and the coming of the Lord. So number one, probably this is the big one. You had rockets fired from Lebanon into northern Israel this last couple of days. It's the first time really since the change of power there in Israel has Hezbollah in Lebanon done this. So Israel, of course, returned fire with artillery fire on those locations. In the middle of all that happening, though, you had Israeli jets go into Syria right outside of Aleppo and take out munitions depots there for Iran's missile stockpile right there. Not only was there huge explosions when that happened, but even explosions followed. And come to find out, it was a weapons producing plant for Iran. So it's amazing how Israel finds that stuff out, blows that stuff up, and it was another location for a site for the Revolutionary Guard. So Israel is having to continually, almost every week, do preemptive strikes against missiles that are coming from Iran down into Syria to make their way over into Lebanon so they can fire at Israel. So it's when Lebanon and Hezbollah and Hamas, Lebanon doesn't do it, but Hamas and Hezbollah publicly talk about what they're getting ready to do to Israel. You see Israel get on guard, and so Israel has to completely protect itself, specifically with Iran being able to go forward with all its nuclear weapons programs. It is intriguing to see the verbal assaults kind of against the nations that they say, oh, you got to help Iran out, you got to lower sanctions. Even the U.S. has lowered sanctions. The U.S. has done things to basically aid Iran to do these things. So it's been bizarre to watch what you would see come out to kind of help them. So in the middle of all that, you got a lot of stuff happening around Israel. I've been waiting for some things to happen more with the Temple Mount. This last week, you had 1,700 Jews go up on the Temple Mount and pray. Muslims went crazy. It was in commemoration of the 9th of Av, the commemoration of the temple being destroyed 2 times. Amazing how it happened on the exact same date. So that happened. Muslims went crazy. Well, the Jews went up again to pray, and were allowed to again the next day. There was obviously skirmishes and things happened there. So there's, I think, a lot getting ready to happen with the Temple Mount, to the point that you have King Abdullah from Jordan coming to America to discuss literally a 2-state solution. Jordan didn't like it before because they felt like they were trying to make it the Palestinian state. So Jordan's pushing for 2 separate Palestinian states. And I've been waiting for Jordan to come on the scene more, and they're exactly doing that right now. So all the little players are coming into position. You have Erdogan from Turkey working with Cyprus, trying to split Cyprus up into 2 different entities. So Turkey's always doing something, bringing troops down into Libya, training Hamas troops right outside of Libya so they can attack Israel from Gaza. So you got Turkey doing that. You've got Iran firing into American bases in Iraq. All these things are happening. This is probably the crazy one that's amazing. You had China out loud publicly say, if Japan tries to mess with them when they go into Taiwan, that China will respond with a nuclear weapon. China said if there's one person that comes against them, they will come to Japan with nuclear weapons. So crazy. So America answered by saying, okay, we're sending 15 F-22 stealth fighters there. I believe it were 10 F-15s they were sending, 800 airmen to be there on site in Guam. So America responded with that. You've got Iran launching stealth missile ships. They're kind of a smaller boat so they can fire missiles off of it. You got Russia that was basically touting hypersonic missiles. So America said, well, okay, we're going to put hypersonic missiles in NATO. Russia said they'll respond. So you have all the players for what you'd see right before the coming of the Lord literally on the field right now doing what the Bible said they would do just before the coming of the Lord. Absolutely amazing. So we always go back to the Scripture. What's the Scripture say? So we can always trust the Word. Headlines come and go, but the word never changes. Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation that sees that will not pass away till all is fulfilled. But then you have so many more. So we're that generation, whether we like it or not. I hear people go, I'm not comfortable with that. It doesn't matter. So we're it. But then what's amazing is you have all these other things. You have the Hebrew language restored. You have the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You have the fertility of the land of Israel. You have the revival of the Roman Empire. You have the Temple Mount Institute. You have 172 different species of predatory birds show up on the land. You have the cleanup crew on the land for Israel. Amazing. You had foxes show up on the Temple Mount. You had fish show up in the Dead Sea. You had the ritual baths around the Temple Mount fill up with water. You got men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. I mean, it's amazing event after event after event that God said you would see just before the coming of the Lord, and it's unfolded right before our eyes. So it propels us to do the will of God. The amazing thing about it, that's right, England, we're about to see Jesus. That's the coolest thing there is we're about to see the King of Kings. He's about to be honored in the earth. Everything you see happening so he can present himself to his brethren, just like Joseph did at the very end. So you have all these signs, but then you got signals. You had the blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles a few years ago. 4 in a row. NASA called it a tetrad. When's the last time you had 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel's made a nation. 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. Amazing. So you have that. Then you have the Bethlehem star this last year. Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus came together. Happened at the birth of Jesus. The constellation was Virgo because he's born of a virgin. This last year, NBC Nightly News said we have a celestial event. You have the Bethlehem star. What was the constellation? Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. So you have all these. You have many more signs in the heavens. I didn't even get into it, but you have a comet that they just discovered that's 60 to 215 miles wide. You've got asteroids that they're seeing after the fact every week. You've got so many floods. You've got so many fires. There's this extremes in every area that you see with volcanic activity, with earthquake activity, and with things happening in the earth. Why? The King's coming back. It is radical to see event after event that points to getting ready to see Jesus face to face. So soon, the church is going to be caught up. There's a lot of preaching now about not being a rapture. Enoch was raptured. Elijah was raptured. Jesus was raptured. The church will be raptured. Each one you hand off to another group. Enoch handed off to Noah. Elijah handed off to Elisha. Jesus handed off to the church. The church will hand off to the Jews. God's going to raise up 144,000 Jewish evangelists, and their harvest will be 50% of the earth at the second coming. Pretty amazing to see the harvest they'll have. One's taken and one's left. Exactly 50% of the population will have gotten saved during the tribulation. So we're watching the setup for the King to come back. Amazing. Jesus of Nazareth, the one who died for you, raised from the dead, and soon coming back. He said, I'm he that was dead. Behold, I'm alive forevermore. I have the keys of death and hell. Amazing, our King. Well, we'll come back this next week. What do? You help your local church, help your local pastor, be engaged, be on board, do everything you can. We'll come back this next week and see what's happening around Israel. We'll see what else they've had to do to protect themselves because Jesus is coming so soon. Have a blessed Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.
One love to overshadow.